Hi guys, I am getting ready to do chapter A.5 for you, which is on subtracting rational numbers. Remember, rational numbers are those numbers that are in between, like mixed numbers, decimals, and they're positive and negative. So we'll hit chapter A.5, that's the last section in chapter A, and then you'll be doing your practice quiz and your quiz. So let's get started. Turn to chapter A5, get your paper, pencil ready, and we'll get started. Okay, so this is chapter A as in apple, 5, subtracting rational numbers. If you want to follow along in the textbook, I will be on page 530. Okay, subtracting rational numbers. Remember, rational numbers are those in-between numbers that are positive or negative, like decimals or mixed numbers. To subtract rational numbers, you're going to use the same rules as subtracting integers. Integers are positive and negative numbers. Okay, these are my favorite when you're subtracting a negative. So two negative signs in a row. I always get excited when I see those. So I have 1/5 minus a negative. Two negatives in a row here, 4/5. You take those two negatives and you combine them into one big positive. So then your problem changes from 1/5 minus a negative 4/5 to 1/5 plus 4/5. You're making two negatives into a positive. So I just combine the two negatives into a big plus sign. I love seeing those two negatives together. So just rewrite it with the positive sign, the plus sign in there, 1/5 plus 4/5. Easy enough, that's 5/5, and you get 1 for that answer. Negative subtracting a positive. You are adding the opposite. So a negative number and you're subtracting a positive number. It looks like this. Negative number subtracting a positive number. So we're going to do the opposite here. We're going to have our negative number, negative 4 1/7. We're going to add the opposite. So we're adding a negative 5/7. Well, if you have one negative and you're adding more negatives, you're going to have a negative answer. And these already have a common denominator, so I didn't need to change. So I just added them together. So I have 1/5 plus 1/7 plus 5/7 gives me 6/7. So I have a negative 4 6/7. So remember your signs, though. You have a negative and you're adding more negatives, so it's going to be a bigger negative number. Okay, let's look at this example. 2.4. or 2 4/10 minus 5 6/10, or 5.6. It's really important that you figure out which is the bigger number. So you have 2.4 and you're taking away 5.6. So in your head right now you should be thinking my answer is going to be negative because I'm taking away more than I actually have in the positive. So we're going to add the opposite instead of subtracting here. So we have 2.4 plus a negative 5.6, adding the opposite of what it was. This was subtracting a positive. We're going to add a negative here. And then this says bigger number is negative. Answer will be negative because the 5.6 is negative. So then you just subtract them. Line up your decimals, right? 5.2 minus 6.4 gives me 3.2, but my answer has to be negative, so it's a negative 3.2. Remember to pause the video if you ever need a little more time on these. Okay, here's an example. We got 3 things going on here. 3 things. So I have a negative 1 3/8 minus 8 1/2. And then here's my favorite, 2 negatives together. So subtracting a negative 6 7/8. So first I need to do some changing. I'm going to change the subtraction to add the opposite. And I am going to combine these two negatives here into one big positive. So I need to rewrite it. So I still have my negative 1 3/8. Now I have a plus negative 8 1/2. And then I'm changing these two negatives into my big positive here. Plus sign, 6 7/8. Well, I would like to make my life easier. I already have two that have a common denominator, so I want to combine these two first. So I have a negative 1 3/8 plus 6 7/8. Because this is negative, I actually need to take it away from the 6 7/8. So I have 6 7/8 minus 1 3/8. That's going to give me 5 4/8. The bigger number here is positive, so my answer is going to be positive for this part of the problem. So I got 5 4/8, which can be reduced to 5 1/2. Hey, look at that. Now we have a common denominator here. So now I'm going to take that 5 1/2 and I'm adding the negative 8 1/2. Right? Adding negative 8 1/2. So I'm actually subtracting these out to find out what the answer is. The 8 1/2 is negative and it is bigger, so my answer needs to be negative at this time. So I have 8 1/2 minus 5 1/2. That's going to give me 3. My answer has to be negative because that 8 1/2 was larger, so it is a negative 3. Next type of example, you have to find the distance on a number line. So when you do this, you're just taking the absolute value of each number to find the difference. So remember, absolute value is the distance on a number line. It's the distance from 0. So we're going to use that to help us out in this section, finding the distance on a number line. So here's an example. Find the distance between negative 1/3 and negative 2 on a number line. Well, I broke up my number line into thirds. So I went in the negative direction. Here's my 0. I got negative 1/3, negative 2/3. This would be negative 3/3, which is also a negative 1. Negative 1 1/3, negative 1 2/3, and negative 2. So that took me the whole range of where I needed to be, and I need to find the distance between those two. So I'm just going to subtract the absolute value of them. So instead of negative 2, I've got 2, and I'm going to subtract out 1/3, which is the absolute value of negative 1/3. I need to know what that distance is, that difference. So I changed my 2 to 6/3. That is 2, right? So 6/3 minus 1/3 gives me 5/3, and then I change that over to a mixed number. 3 goes into 5 one time. I have 2 left over 3, so 1 2/3. So this would be my distance. Distance is always going to be a positive number. So the distance on the number line, I've shown it here, would be 1 2/3. You only have a couple of those types of examples. All right, try these. I want to see if you can try these. Go ahead and pause the video after you see the problems, write them down, and I'm going to go through how to solve these in just a second. So go ahead and pause the video and try these out in your notebook. Okay, hopefully you were able to get through those two problems that I wanted you to try. It's very important that you try them on your own and not just copy down the answers, because I really want to make sure that you understand the skill on how to get to the answer. So let's look at the first one. We have 5/8 minus a negative 7/8. Those are my favorite. Two negatives together, I want to combine that into one big positive. Right, so now I rewrote it. I have 5/8 plus 7/8, which makes my life easy because I can add those together. They have a common denominator. 12/8, and then I break that down into a mixed number. 8 goes into 12 one time. I have 4 left over 8. I need to reduce that. That's just 1 1/2. So hopefully you're able to get that. Yay if you did. And the last one, we have some decimals. So -1 minus 2.5. Remember, we're subtracting a positive, so we need to add a negative instead. So I have -1 plus -2.5. Okay, we have a negative, we're adding more negative, our answer is going to be negative. And this is just simple decimal. I added them together. So I have 2.5 plus 1.0. 1.0 is the -1. And I get -3.5. Answer has to be negative. Hopefully you got that one right too. Yay. All right, hopefully now you're ready to try some on your own. Your assignment for chapter A.5 is either the textbook, page 534 and 535. I need you to do 11 through 23 on page 534 and 35 through 44 on page 535. Take a picture, send it to me in email so you can get credit for it. Or you can go to bigideasmath.com and there is a chapter A5 assignment there for you. I've given you up to 3 times to check your answer. So go ahead and get started on this. Remember, my office hours for you guys are Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. I am there for you. Just shoot me a message on there, okay? Good luck.